This fly, the Palmered soldier, has taken me down a rabbit hole. Ed's story suggests that the term palmered be used when the hackle is tied in with from the butt of the hackle with the dull side towards you, the shiny side towards the hook, so that when it's wrapped, the fibers are leaning towards the eye of the hook. Then he suggests that if you tie the hackle in by the tip with the shiny side out, that will make the fibers lean towards the hook bend, and that is called a reverse palmer. Well, that got me wondering about the term palmer, where it comes from, what its history is. What I'm tying is the soldiered palmer as it is illustrated in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories. And I'm tying this fly off of the illustration in the book, illustration that was done by Mary's father, Charles. It's called the soldier palmer because the red body, I guess, imitates the British redcoats. We're in the United States familiar with that term as part of the history of the American Revolution, and the British soldiers dressed in red. So we're familiar with the term redcoat. I suppose that Brits would also be familiar with that term in their history. So I am tying this fly on a number 14 straight shank dry fly. I am using a thinner strand of red. The recipe calls for wool. Some recipes actually have wool dubbing and not yarn. This is Dirty Bug yarn that I'm using, but it comes off of the spool in two strands, which I separated to get a finer body on it. And then I am tying the hackle in, tied in tip first, hopefully, so that it makes those fibers tip backwards. I am spiraling it through the body and making sure I leave plenty of room at the front for a fuller front hackle, although it is supposed to imitate a hairy caterpillar. I am following or trying to follow the illustration in Mary Marbury's book, where there is a finer hackle on the body and a fuller hackle on the front of the fly. So for that, I am going to take a heavier brown hackle feather. I'm clipping the stiffer part of the stem off the bottom and clipping hairs off of the end so that I can tie that in by that far enough back to give myself a good hackle. So back to the history of the word hackle, or palmer. So when the Bible was translated into English, the early translators were obviously looking for English words and English insects that would match the descriptions of those in the Bible. And that's really where this palmer word comes from. So in the Old Testament book of Joel, God promises his people that when they repent, he will restore to them their land, and that he will take away from them the insects that have consumed their crops. So in England then, early translators, and I'm making an assumption here from what I know about translation history, they're looking for a word that will match those consuming insects. And there are 4 insects listed in Joel, in this chapter, in Joel chapter, or the prophet Joel chapter 2, that today are all translated as different kinds of locusts. But when it was originally translated, the 4th of those was called a palmer worm. And so the word palmer was attached to a moth caterpillar. There are other caterpillar, because the 3rd word in the King James translation is caterpillar, but this particular other caterpillar, called a palmer worm, would have been a moth caterpillar, and it is a hairy caterpillar. So then in English fly tying, any fly that has hackle on the body imitates a hairy caterpillar and is called a palmered fly. So there I have kind of a messy head on this, so I'll clip out some of those front hairs. And this particular fly then called the palmer soldier, because it does have the hackle on the body in a spiral wrap, and it has a red body imitating the British redcoats. Palmered soldier. I'm going to throw a little bit of UV resin on that head. Probably something that Mary Orvis Marbury did not put on her flies. I don't know what they used in 1890s for head cement, if they did anything. Well, they didn't have eyes on their hooks then either. Instead, they had a piece of calf gut or something, that they created an eye on the front of their hooks. So a little bit of a rabbit hole. The word palmer coming from imitating any hairy caterpillar. This particular illustration from Charles Orvis does have the palmer body feathers facing the hook bend. So tie that body hackle in from the tip with shiny side out, and then it does have a fuller front hackle, kind of imitating the traditional or the original red hackle fly.